I had been using a 1650 Super graphics card for a while, but wanted an upgrade to enhance the graphics in Tarkov. Coincidentally, my cousin EM, 31 years old, and her son, Kid, 13 years old, were visiting my parents at the time. As luck would have it, my new GPU arrived while they were there, so I hurriedly made my way to the office to install it in my PC. Kid followed me, showing interest and engaging in conversation. About halfway through the installation, Kid asked why I had two graphics cards. I explained that I used two computers for my streaming setup. Excitedly, he ran off. I resumed my work, and after approximately 40 minutes of swapping out the GPUs, EM entered the room and began asking me casual questions about what I was doing and how it improved my gaming and streaming experience. I explained the process, elaborating on the advantages of using two computers to handle the demands of streaming and gaming simultaneously. Then came the moment that stung. EM inquired about a suitable computer for Kid's upcoming birthday. I offered to help build a decent budget PC for him within the $800, $1,100 range, as a good starter system. It was at this point that EM uttered words that hurt me deeply. Why don't you give Kid one of your computers? You don't need to, and you haven't given him any meaningful gifts for his birthday in a while. Note, they live across the country. I tried to explain to EM that I couldn't do that because my computer was worth over $3,000 with all the upgrades and RGB lighting. Unfortunately, EM didn't understand or accept my reasoning. She started accusing me of ingratitude, insisting that I should give Kid my computer because we are family. The situation escalated rapidly as EM raised her voice, berating me for supposedly having everything handed to me in life without experiencing any real struggles. Frustrated, I fired back. I work two full-time jobs to afford what I have. I've spent over a year working on these computers. It's not my fault you became a mother at 18 with someone who abandoned you. In a fit of rage, EM violently kicked my computer, shattering the glass and causing irreparable damage to the liquid cooling system and the newly installed 3080 GPU. She almost kicked the second PC housing the 1650 Super, but I managed to tackle her before she could do any more harm. Amid her screams, she accused me of assault while I had my father escort her and Kid off the premises, making it clear that they were no longer welcome. However, that wasn't enough for me. I decided to take legal action and press charges against EM for destroying my expensive gaming PC. I am determined to make her accountable and ensure she compensates me for the damages or faces the consequences, even if it means she spends time in prison for her actions. Context: I, a 65-year-old white male with a full white beard and a well-earned beer gut, found myself shopping at a fairly upscale department store just after Thanksgiving. Now, in fairness to the Karen in this story, I was wearing a bright red hoodie, but with my old, nicely broken, in jeans and gray Merrell hiking boots. Nothing like the business casual attire of the store employees. It's worth mentioning that I also own a full Santa suit, but on this occasion, I hadn't worn it. Now, onto the story. I was perusing the kids' clothing section, searching for something cute for one of my granddaughters who adores shirt dresses, long shorts, and unicorns. I had already placed a couple of t-shirts with mythical beasts in my cart and was now on the lookout for matching shorts. Suddenly, amidst the peaceful shopping ambiance, I heard a piercing cry of "excuse me" from somewhere behind me. Naturally, I chose to ignore it, though I sent a quick prayer to whoever the unlucky individual on the receiving end might be. Oh, silly me. The next thing that shattered my shopping focus was a forcefully jabbing sensation, 3 fingers digging into my shoulder with a surprising intensity that caused me to take an extra half step to maintain my balance. And that's no small feat considering I stand at 6 feet and weigh around 250 pounds. At that moment, my fight or flight reflex leaned towards fight since, as a mildly PTSD veteran, I carry a .44 Bulldog revolver holstered to my hip. Yes, I possess a permit, and no, this store does not prohibit legally carried weapons. With a swift motion, I spun around to face my assailant, instinctively stepping back to create some space. My right hand naturally gravitated towards my holster, not with the intention of pulling out the weapon, but more as a precautionary measure to ensure nobody was reaching for it. Meanwhile, my left hand balled into a fist. This sudden action startled a squawk out of the woman, later to be identified as Karen, who appeared to be in her 30s or 40s, accompanied by a child of elementary school age. Taking a half step back, she seemed slightly taken aback, and I allowed myself to relax a little. We locked eyes in silence for what felt like a brief eternity, but I was the first to regain composure. "What is wrong with you? Why did you hit me?" I bellowed, unable to contain my outrage. Instead of offering an apology, Karen, in true Karen fashion, retorted, "I did no such thing. If you weren't ignoring customers, I wouldn't have had to resort to that." "I don't work here," I began to explain, but Karen abruptly interrupted me, her voice screeching with entitlement. "Now, take me to your village or whatever. My niece wants her picture with you." Utterly bewildered, my brain struggled to process this nonsensical topic shift. "What?" I managed to say, feeling momentarily stunned. "You know, the place where you take pictures of kids," Karen clarified, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "Lady, I'm not a photographer," I responded, my confusion mounting. I couldn't help but wonder if either of us was experiencing some sort of cognitive glitch. "Of course not. The kids sit on you and get their picture taken." "What kind of Santa are you?" Karen insisted, her expression shifting from anger to puzzlement. Finally, the gears in my mind began to align as I recalled the color of my sweatshirt. "Ma'am, I'm not Santa. I'm just a shopper, like you," I clarified, hoping to clear up the misunderstanding. A perplexed look replaced Karen's entitled wrath. "Well, then you shouldn't dress like one. You're just a tease." Shaking my head, I replied, "So I shouldn't wear jeans?" At that moment, laughter erupted, a chorus of snorts and chuckles that couldn't be contained. I turned around and noticed a group of employees and customers I had previously overlooked, each sporting a different expression, ranging from suppressed snickering to broad grins. Karen, too, became aware of the audience she had unwittingly gathered and stormed away without uttering another word. It wasn't my wittiest comeback, but it pleased the peanut gallery nonetheless. I simply bowed my head and resumed my shopping, grateful for the momentary amusement that had broken the monotony of the day. This incident takes me back to when I was around 14 years old. To give you some context, I lived in a modest colony comprised of rows of buildings, each containing 4 small 2 BHK apartments. The community consisted of kind-hearted, lower-middle-class individuals who were always willing to lend a helping hand. The buildings were arranged in a triangular shape, with a small triangular park in the center. However, this park was nothing more than a patch of dirt and lacked the trees and flowers typically found in parks. During my free time, I would often play outside with my friends near our houses, while the older kids occupied the park for their cricket matches. Even though we had ample space for our own cricket and soccer games, we preferred to steer clear of the park. The older kids played with leather balls, and the boundary walls surrounding the park made us feel safer. One evening, as we were playing near a corner outside my friend's house, a new family had just moved into the apartment above his. They had 2 kids, aged around 8 to 10. Since we were engaged in informal games rather than organized sports, we allowed them to join us in our game of tag. However, when one of those kids got caught, he threw a tantrum and wailed at the top of his lungs. In response to his cries, his mother appeared on the balcony, instantly erupting into a tirade of profanity aimed directly at us. We couldn't understand the meaning of her words, but our friend Dan, who happened to be the neighbor of this entitled parent, EP, comprehended the severity of the situation. Overwhelmed, he burst into tears and hastily ran back to his home. Confused and concerned, we followed Dan, finding him in tears as he clung to his mother. She assured us that Dan would be all right and encouraged us to carry on with our activities, promising that he would join us again the following day. The next day, we discovered that Dan's mother had confronted the EP to discuss the previous day's incident. The EP claimed that we had intentionally injured her precious son's knee when we had pushed him. Although Dan's mother knew this accusation was untrue, the EP's child did have a minor bruise, which made Dan's mother hesitant to argue further. She simply requested that we refrain from interacting with the EP's sons. Interestingly, the child had no visible injury until we saw him. Ignoring the incident, we proceeded to the park to play soccer, enjoying a fun-filled time together. On the subsequent day, we were compelled to play outside our houses, and it was during this time that the troublesome duo made their appearance again. We ignored them, as if they were mere apparitions, primarily because their mother remained perched on the balcony, watching us like a sharpshooter awaiting her chance. While engrossed in our game, one of our friends fell victim to the EP's child, who struck him on the shin with a half-brick. The blow left a painful blue mark, but thankfully, no blood was drawn. Dan, outraged by this act, shouted at the EP to control her child. In response, she sarcastically quipped, "Are you afraid of a little kid?" Seizing the opportunity, Dan charged towards the child with the intention to push him, but the Karen-like figure bellowed from the balcony, warning Dan not to lay a finger on her son. Sensing our vulnerability, the other child then struck Dan forcefully on the back with a stick, causing the EP to erupt into laughter. However, if any of us dared to approach her kids, she would breathe fire and unleash her fury. Feeling defeated, we retreated to our respective homes. The following day, we decided to play outside our houses once again, but to our dismay, the troublemaking duo appeared with thick nylon ropes adorned with knots and chains. They swung them around, striking us while the EP observed everything from her balcony. We felt utterly helpless, as if there was nothing we could do to defend ourselves. The kids started targeting me, relentlessly striking me with their ropes, and I stood there, enduring the blows. As a quiet and shy child who had been bullied in the past, I was accustomed to such mistreatment. However, my friends came to my rescue, pushing the kids away. In response, the kids swung their ropes even harder, but Dan, fueled by anger, delivered a powerful punch to one of them. The EP screeched and rushed downstairs, snatching up her child and commanding the other to strike us as much as he could. She threatened that she would ensure we never walked again. Fearing the consequences, we scattered in different directions, nursing our wounds. I kept my bruises hidden, choosing not to reveal them to anyone. The subsequent day, Dan's mother appeared to be in a dreadful state, clearly having spent a considerable amount of time in tears. As a single mother, she had been subjected to a torrent of verbal abuse from the EP and her husband, who criticized her for being single and failing to instill proper values in her son. They hurled every insult imaginable at her. Overwhelmed, she called her brother to come to her aid, and he arrived at her place early in the morning. To their astonishment, they discovered peculiar spell-like papers tied to their doors, windows, and even Dan's bicycle's support wheels. I didn't understand the nature of those enchanted papers, but they contained tables and texts that seemed akin to curses or some form of dark magic. Despite her own pain, Dan's mother encouraged him to play with us, not wanting him to witness her distress. Surprisingly, the hellish children did not emerge that day. However, by the end of our playtime, a few neighbors had gathered at Dan's house, responding to a tip they received about Dan's mother mistreating her child. They stayed at the house until around 9 p.m., engaging in deep discussion. The following day, Dan's mother expressed her gratitude to us for being good friends to Dan and requested that we enjoy our time playing together before he departed to visit his grandmother. On that day, the Hellspawn duo brazenly brandished a knife while Karen monitored their actions closely. We kept our distance, opting to play in the park instead. However, after approximately 15 minutes, the Hellspawn made their way to the park. One of them threw the knife at us, grazing the arm of one of our friends and causing the skin to break, resulting in a bleeding wound. Karen observed the entire incident without intervention. In panic, we rushed to Dan's mother for assistance. Witnesses in and around the park had witnessed the events unfold and had gathered around Dan's house. Our parents were contacted, and the wounded child's parents promptly alerted the police. The police arrived at a house surrounded by a crowd of at least 20 people, with Karen vehemently hurling profanities at everyone present. She adamantly claimed that the child was fabricating the story to incriminate her innocent son, asserting that the wound was self-inflicted. She bombarded the policemen with her lies, insisting that her children were blameless and that we were all liars. Although there were no CCTV cameras available at the time, the substantial number of witnesses present, coupled with the still bleeding wound on the child's arm, provided sufficient evidence. Consequently, the EP was arrested, and her husband was apprehended at his workplace.